Today's show is sponsored by Vincero Watches, which is an American company building super premium wristwatches starting at only about $150. And they're giving you 15% off when you go to davidpakman.com/Vincero. I've put the link underneath this video. Today's show also sponsored by Blinkist, which is the app that lets you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try Blinkist totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/DavidPakman. That link is underneath the video as well. All right, let's begin with last night's vice presidential debate between Vice President Mike Pence and Joe Biden's running mate Kamala Harris, senator from California. Expectations were very high for Kamala Harris. Her experience as a prosecutor and certainly her performances during testimony in the Senate have been elements of why expectations were very high for how she would do. And she did well. And I believe that she won the debate to the extent that there was a winner. But I do think that she was not nearly as tough on Mike Pence as she was on Joe Biden during Democratic primary debates. I think there were missed opportunities, but I'm going to say more about that in a little bit. But the big picture here, if we don't want to miss the forest for the trees. And the big picture is that Kamala Harris did well on everything coronavirus related. She did okay on economic issues, and she was sort of so-so on some other topics, which we will discuss. But if you ask me, what will the impact of this debate be on the election? I believe that it is almost zero. It's not zero, but it's very, very close to zero, because with everything going on, with Donald Trump behind in the polls, Donald Trump releasing videos from the White House in which he really doesn't look good, which we will talk about, nothing happened in this debate that will change the polling very much. And that's not good for Donald Trump and Mike Pence, because if you believe the polling is even roughly accurate, they need something to put them back in the lead. And the most likely scenario is that in the next 72, 48, 24, in the next 5 minutes, some new scandal will pop up and the vice presidential debate will be all but forgotten. But let's look at a few moments from it. First of all, the fact that there even was plexiglass installed at the last minute between the candidates, that's not good for Mike Pence. The plexiglass being needed is a topic that in and of itself is an indictment of the Trump-Pence handling of coronavirus. And indeed, they went right into coronavirus. It was the first question. I actually think this was Kamala Harris's best moment of the entire debate, coming right at the beginning.
Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. We're looking at frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers. We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for unemployment. And here's the thing. On January 28th, the vice president and the president were informed about the nature of this pandemic. They were informed that it's lethal in consequence, that it is airborne, that it will affect young people, and that it would be contracted because it is airborne. And they knew what was happening, and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine?
So this was Kamala's best moment. If you watched only the first question or only the first 10-minute segment, which was on coronavirus, and then you bailed on the debate, you would come away with the best possible impression of how it went for Kamala Harris. The rest of the debate was more mixed because Mike Pence kept going over his time, sometimes by as much as a minute. The moderator was unable to get him under control. Mike Pence would continually avoid answering the actual question being discussed by going back and answering the previous question or going 2 questions back. At one point, it got so bad, I wondered if Pence was going to ask to spend some time on questions from his 2016 debate with Tim Kaine. He just wanted to set the agenda himself, and combining that with the kind of calm, arrogant delivery that Pence is known for, I think certainly he came up looking good enough that his base is not going to say, I can no longer support Trump-Pence because of Pence. Whether any undecideds were convinced to the extent that they still remain, much less clear. Here's an example of Pence doing this. Pence asked, why does the U.S. have a much higher death rate than just about every other country? Mike Pence just talks about something else.
Higher than that of almost every other wealthy country. And you have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Susan, thank you. And I want to thank the Commission and the University of Utah for hosting this event. And Senator Harris, it's a privilege to be on the stage with you. And our nation has gone through a very challenging time this year. But I want the American people to know that from the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first. Before, there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China.
So I'll spare you the torture, but he did about 2 minutes of that without actually answering, why does the United States have one of the highest death rates per capita in the world from coronavirus? In another moment, Mike Pence was asked about that super spreader event that they held at the White House, not this past Saturday, but the previous one, the nomination party for Amy Coney Barrett. And of course, we know that that event was at least partially responsible for multiple instances, multiple cases of coronavirus related to the White House. Watch Pence just bail out.
To speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were in the front row in a Rose Garden event 11 days ago at what seems to have been a super spreader event for senior administration and congressional officials. No social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there. How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID when you at the White House have not been doing so?
Well, the American people have demonstrated over the last 8 months that when given the facts, they're willing to put the health of their families and their neighbors and people they don't even know first. And President Trump and I have great confidence in the American people and their ability to take that information and put it into practice. In the height of the epidemic.
So that is not Pence building to some kind of clear answer about the super spreader event at the White House. That's Pence ranting and raving about other things. And that was the entire debate. Here's an example of Mike Pence apparently realizing that the coronavirus portion of the debate at the beginning did not go well for him. Here is Pence asked about presidential health and age and disability. And Mike Pence just says, well, I'm going to keep talking about coronavirus.
Had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes without interruption.
Well, Susan, thank you, although I would like to go back.
I think we need to move on to the issue of
but I would like to go back because the reality is that we're going to have a vaccine, Senator, in record time.
That was the whole debate. I won't give you more examples of that. Mike Pence also did some of his normal theatrics, which include refusing to accept the science on climate change, repeating Donald Trump's talking point about how forest fires could be solved by forest management, which they claim Democrats are either against or aren't doing. And then maybe the most bizarre moment of the debate was when a fly landed on Mike Pence's head and stayed there for minutes. And the fly landing on Mike Pence's head was funny to start with, but the fact that it seemed to be stuck in Mike Pence's hair gel was even funnier. And that instantly became a viral moment. The Joe Biden campaign immediately starting to sell fly swatters, and many allegories made to the biblical meaning of when a fly lands on you. For those more religious folks in the audience, it's ominous. It's not good. But the moment that many say was Kamala Harris's worst of the debate was when the topic of packing the courts came up. Now, the question came up during the Biden-Trump debate last week. And the question is, if Joe Biden is elected and Republicans confirm Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court, will Joe Biden pack the Supreme Court, meaning add seats to the Supreme Court? And Kamala Harris, much like Joe Biden, did not give a yes or no answer. And there's a lot of people who are saying it looks really bad for Kamala not to answer the question. I'm not so sure. Let me explain. there clearly has been a strategic decision made by the Biden campaign not to answer yes or no about whether Joe Biden would pack the court. I don't think court packing is a voting issue for many people. So really, there's a lot of potential downside to giving a straight answer. And I'll explain what I mean. If they say yes or no, they, number one, make the answer the focus rather than the threat of using this in the future. And if you answer yes or no, the unknown threat of maybe Biden will pack the court goes away. And so I understand the risk when you decide you're not going to answer a question. There's a risk that you're going to appear evasive. But I understand the strategy because I don't think there's much to gain by saying definitively yes or no. If Biden and Harris say yes, if Amy Coney Barrett gets confirmed, we will pack the court. The right and those on the left who don't want the court packed will go crazy. And that becomes the focus rather than Republican hypocrisy about confirming Amy Coney Barrett with just days left before an election. If Biden and Harris say we won't pack the court, they bail out the GOP. And they're basically saying, even if you confirm Amy Coney Barrett, don't worry, we're not going to pack the court. So while I accept that Harris didn't answer, I actually understand why. And it will be a question as to whether it works or doesn't work. But I get the strategy. Mike Pence also during the debate seemed to have a fat lip, and his left eye was either bloody with a burst blood vessel or with pink eye, which can sometimes happen with coronavirus. So it was impossible not to notice his physical appearance during the debate. It was bizarre. But big picture, the debate was not a nothing burger. I think that you saw how, when Kamala Harris went after Joe Biden in the primary, you imagined there would be more ferocity and energy from her against Mike Pence. And I took live calls last night after the debate, and a bunch of my callers said, sometimes when women are assertive or aggressive in popular culture, it counts against them. The Martha Stewart effect, as it's sometimes been described. And I think that that is absolutely true to a degree. I still would have liked to see a balanced approach that had Kamala Harris more on the offensive, which we know she can do. We've seen her do it in the Senate. We've seen her do it in other contexts. But the big picture is I don't think the debate is going to change a thing. And when the polling is looking so bad for Trump and Pence, with now only 25 days left until this election, they need something to turn it around. And this debate is not going to be the thing that does it. Let's talk about the polling. We all must be cautious, careful, and diligent in our participation in this election. We all must vote. We all must get people to vote. But as a brief interlude to our discussion of the last 24 hours, polling has completely imploded this week for Donald Trump. I'm going to go through with you all of the new polling now that we are just 25, 26 days from the election. And it is a veritable disaster for Donald Trump. If these numbers are even remotely accurate, and if voter suppression and dirty tricks don't end up being how Trump claws his way back up, this could be really bad for Trump if we vote. And remember, this polling is all post first debate, and it is post Trump getting coronavirus and pulling his COVID stunt on the White House portico. So first, nationally, Joe Biden is +9 in a new poll, +10 in a new poll, and shockingly, +12 in a new Rasmussen poll, typically one of the most right-wing polls that we have. If you look overall at recent national polls, this now pushes Joe Biden's advantage to an average of 9.4 points over Donald Trump. As you can see in the trend lines, it is not going in the right direction for Trump. The recent reversal with a Trump decline and Biden ascension started on September 29th. That's where we've seen this drop for Trump start, September 29th. Now, let's not go crazy. We still have almost 4 weeks to go. If we look at Trump versus Hillary, 26 days out from the election back in 2016. Remember, in 2016, the election was on November 8th. So if we go back 26 days from the 2016 election, Hillary's lead was 6.7. So yes, Joe Biden's lead today is bigger than Hillary's 4 years ago, but Hillary was also climbing at this point in 2016, and Biden's lead now is only 40% bigger than Hillary's was. You might remember, I told you a few days ago, Biden's lead today is 140% bigger than Hillary's was at this point 4 years ago. Biden's lead is growing, but Hillary's was growing even more quickly at this point in time. So let's just understand that, not become complacent. Now let's look at some state polls. Remember, we have an electoral college system in this country where each state is worth a certain number of electoral votes, 270 being the total you need to clinch the presidency. The latest state polls are very bad for Trump. Yesterday, we had a new Marquette poll for Wisconsin, and Biden is +5. That's good for Biden. Ohio, according to New York Times Siena, Biden is +1. If Biden wins Ohio, you can essentially say goodbye to Donald Trump. In Pennsylvania, from Emerson, Biden is +5. But then we have a Quinnipiac poll, which has Biden up 13 in Pennsylvania, 11 in Florida, which is just incredible, and 5 in Iowa. And then also notable yesterday, New York Times Siena poll says Biden is up 6 in Nevada. And even the poll out of West Virginia that says Trump is up 18. Remember that in 2016, Trump won West Virginia by 42. If indeed Trump wins West Virginia by only 18, that would be a very small margin of victory in one of the reddest states in the country. So the debate clearly did not work well for Donald Trump. Having coronavirus, pulling his corona ride, and COVID stunts have not helped him. And now we will wait and see what the impact of the vice presidential debate is, if any. Let me know what you think it will be. I'm on Twitter at @DPakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
What if you could read 10 books in just one sitting? That's exactly what one of my favorite apps lets you do. It's called Blinkist. And what they do is take thousands of popular nonfiction books. They condense them down into text or audio that you can consume in 15 minutes. Blinkist makes sure that you're getting all of the important core insights from each book. So it's perfect for exploring a book you otherwise wouldn't have time for. If there's a full book you're thinking about buying, you can use Blinkist to get a sample first. Just think how much you can enrich yourself by being able to soak up an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way. And it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month, and you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Remember to grab a membership at joinpakman.com and support The David Pakman Show. We have a great place on the internet for you to engage with our other viewers and listeners. It's The David Pakman Show subreddit, which you can find at davidpakman.com/Reddit. A few interesting posts from this morning. If Trump loses the election fair and square, what do you think he'll do as president during the interregnum period, also known as lame duck? I think this is a user on our subreddit. I think he'll probably pull a Matt Bevin and pardon a bunch of heinous criminals, murderers, rapists, etc. That's his way of lashing out against the public who he will feel betrayed him. I also think he'll probably try to start a war or something before he leaves office so he can hand the conflict over to Biden. I don't know about starting a war. I do think that if Trump loses and it is clear that he lost and Trump has no way to argue he didn't lose, I do think that there is a real risk of complete and total insanity during that lame duck period. Now, hopefully by that point, the world will be so desperate for normal people in the White House that Joe Biden will essentially become the president in waiting. He will be running a parallel presidency, directly interacting with world leaders, and Donald Trump will immediately be pushed to the margins. But let's not put the cart before the horse. And remember, my other concern is physical violence from Trump supporters during that lame duck period, if they believe Donald Trump had it stolen from him. So let's take it a day at a time. Let's first remove Trump. Then we'll figure out how to handle the lame duck period. Another post from the subreddit says Joe Biden should not attend the debate next week. I knew someone who experienced COVID symptoms for 5 weeks and was probably still infectious during that time. We have no idea what Trump is truly experiencing right now. He'll still likely be contagious next Thursday. Biden should not participate. Well, Joe Biden may have been bailed out because Donald Trump now says he will not participate because the Commission on Presidential Debates has decided, as of this second, it already may have changed by the time we get today's show out. As of this second, the CPD says next week's debate will be remote because of the situation as we know it. And Donald Trump has said he won't participate. So we will see. But I understand your concern. The last thing we need is Joe Biden getting the virus from Donald Trump. And then lastly, from the subreddit, user Flameboy says, unless I've missed something, did anyone else notice there's been no videos released of Bunker Baby since he got back to the White House? It'll be interesting to see how long it is until we see another one with all of his cronies repeatedly saying that everything is fine. Well, we finally got a video from Trump from the White House, and that's what I will talk about next. But you can join the discussion on the David Pakman Show subreddit at davidpakman.com/REDDIT. Okay, let's get into it. Donald Trump, in a continued effort to show us how great he's doing, how healthy he is, has put out another video in which he calls catching COVID a blessing from God. But the real worthiness of the news video is that Donald Trump looks terrible. He sounds terrible. He doesn't even seem to know what day it is or how long he was in the hospital. So let's look at it. This is nearly a 5-minute video. We're not going to look at all of it. But the first thing you notice as we just play some video without audio for our audience that's watching is that Donald Trump's face looks completely bruised. And I think that what they did is deliberately put him under a tree so that there's a shadow on his face from the branches. But that's not all that's going on. In other words, his right cheek seems bruised. His right eye is almost completely swollen shut for most of the video. His lips seem like the only thing on his face that don't have makeup, and they are absolutely white as a ghost. It's an image of a man not doing particularly well, despite claiming now for days that Trump has had no symptoms. But when you start listening to what Trump says, you can't help but notice that Donald Trump is cotton-mouthed, short of breath, and slurring even more than is usual for him. Let's look at the first clip.
Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president. And I'm standing in front of the Oval Office at the White House, which is always an exciting place to be. I got back a day ago from Walter Reed Medical Center. I spent 4 days there.
So it's already very strange because Trump says, I got back a day ago. Well, when this was released yesterday, Trump had already been back at the White House for 2 days. Now, maybe the explanation is simple. Maybe they filmed it Tuesday, but published it Wednesday. But then Donald Trump says he spent 4 days at Walter Reed. He didn't. Trump spent about 54 hours at Walter Reed. He didn't spend 4 days there. He didn't even spend parts of 4 days there. So again, it's raising questions of, is Trump okay? How connected to reality is Donald Trump? This continues. We'll skip ahead a little bit, and then you'll start to notice Donald Trump sounding hoarse and struggling to breathe again.
But I spent 4 days there, and I went in, I wasn't feeling so hot. And within a very short period of time, they gave me Regeneron. It's called Regeneron. And other things too, but I think this was the key. But they gave me Regeneron, and it was like unbelievable. I felt good immediately. I felt as good 3 days ago as I do now. So I just want to say we have Regeneron. We have a very similar drug from Eli Lilly, and they're coming out, and we're trying to get them on an emergency basis. We've authorized it. I've authorized it. And if you're in the hospital and you're feeling really bad, I think we're going to work it so that you get them and you're going to get them free. And especially if you're a senior, we're going to get you in there quick.
So this is interesting because as of this recording, somewhere between 10 and 25 people total in the entire country had received this antibody cocktail from Regeneron. Trump says he's going to give it for free to every senior in the hospital, maybe to everybody even. Now, maybe that's a nice idea. Remember, this is an unapproved antibody cocktail as of yet. But how do you get something that's been given to only 10 or 25 people total? How do you get that to every senior in the hospital with coronavirus for free? In any case, he says that there's many doses coming online. It's an interesting idea, but it doesn't seem to connect with reality. We continue. Donald Trump briefly says vaccines are coming soon. I won't be playing that since it's the same thing he's been saying on vaccines for a while. But then he gets into this getting COVID was a blessing from God stuff.
And that's what I want for everybody. I want everybody to be given the same treatment as your president, because I feel great. I feel like perfect. So I think this was a blessing from God that I caught it. This was a blessing in disguise. I caught it. I heard about this drug. I said, let me take it. It was my suggestion. I said, let me take it. And it was incredible the way it worked. Incredible.
So when Trump says that he feels perfect, that's, of course, really tough to believe when he's slurring with cotton mouth, looking bruised with his right eye swollen shut and struggling to breathe. But this idea that now that Trump has gotten the virus, he's over some hump and now he can really start dealing with it, it is an insult to everyone who didn't have the care that Donald Trump got in his 6-room suite at Walter Reed. It's an insult to everybody who died merely because, I guess up until now, Trump didn't really get it. And who had family members die and the entire thing. And as always, it's what's the phrase? A day late and a dollar short. This is more than that. This is 7 months late and 215,000 deaths too late. And we continue to be very skeptical that Donald Trump is actually healthy. And to be very clear, the speculation that Donald Trump is not doing so well, it's not about making fun of people who have coronavirus. It's not about anything other than they lie about everything, and the hypocrisy of saying Hillary had Parkinson's and Biden has dementia while obviously lying about the health of Donald Trump. The hypocrisy knows no bounds. And we're going to have more about this on the David Pakman Show Instagram page, which I hope you're following, at David Pakman Show on Instagram. And we'll just have to see what Trump looks like by tomorrow. Again, seemingly bailed out on the debate because he doesn't want to do it remote. But we'll talk about that a little bit later in today's program.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
One of our sponsors today is Vincero Watches, and they're giving you 15% off everything in the store. If you're a guy looking for the perfect way to refresh your style, one of the best investments you can make is in a high-quality wristwatch. Vincero is an American company that has made it possible for everyday people to afford a premium watch. Almost everything they sell is within the range of about $200, but it'll look like you spent a lot more. All of their watches are made in small batches from top quality materials, and they just look great. I went on their site and picked out a watch from their Icon Automatic collection. The one I got is in mesh matte black, and I love it. It's simple, sleek, elegant, goes great with just about anything I'm wearing, and I've gotten a ton of compliments on it. You'll get 15% off everything in their store when you go to davidpakman.com/Vincero. I've put the link right underneath this video.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to welcome to the program today Cory Doctorow, who's the author of 2 new books, How to Destroy Surveillance Capitalism, also Attack Surface, the 3rd installment in the New York Times bestselling Little Brothers series. Cory, so great to have you on today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
So to start with, we've talked about surveillance capitalism on the program before, but as someone who's really written a lot about this, how do you explain the concept to someone who may not be familiar with it?
Well, it should be noted that I don't agree with the majority criticism of surveillance capitalism.
Yes.
I think that the majority criticism goes basically Google invented a mind control ray to sell you a fidget spinner, and then Robert Mercer used it to make your uncle racist. And I think that, this gives Google way too much credit. It gives big tech too much credit. The history is littered with people who claim that they could influence us with technology. And mostly what they do is influence their potential customers, like advertisers, to give them a lot of money, but then under-deliver. I think there's every indication that that's what Google and Facebook and other ad tech companies are doing, which is not to say that they aren't spying on us like crazy. They are. And it's not to say that that's not harmful. It super is. And it's not to say that they don't distort our discourse. They do, but they do so because they're monopolists. And monopolists get to subvert the regulatory process so they can do dangerous things like over surveillance and over retention of data. And then, if there's only one place we go to ask questions, the answer that they give us matters a lot to what we believe, but not because they have a mind control ray, just because they've become a canonical source.
So for people who have read about surveillance capitalism, often it's Shoshana Zuboff's work that folks may be familiar with. So correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm glad for you to kind of go into this. It seems as though maybe you believe that Shoshana is correctly identifying some of the characteristics, but the conclusions that she comes to are not necessarily your conclusions.
Yeah, so I think that Zuboff really does believe that machine learning allows tech companies to manipulate us, to take away what she calls our right to the future tense, right? The right to be able to decide for ourselves what we'll do in the future. And I think that that's not true of machine learning, but it's totally true of monopoly, right? If all of your friends are corralled on Facebook, then Facebook can tell you with a high degree of accuracy that you're going to have to stay on Facebook to talk to them. And a way to maybe visualize the difference between our points of view is that she thinks that traditional pro-competition remedies like breaking the companies up or opening them up to interoperability or anything else that we might do to reduce their power will just produce like hundreds of pipsqueaks, each of them with their own mind control ray, and we won't even be able to keep track of them and how they're using them. So imagine that there was a comet headed towards Earth, and you had someone who said, no, we can't try and break the comet up. If we do, it'll turn into a million meteors, and they'll just smash every city on Earth. We have to steer the comet, and that's what she thinks, right? She thinks we need to tame the companies by telling them what they can and can't do, putting them under tighter control, and so on. And I just don't think you can put them under control for so long as they have monopolies, because they have so much excess money from being monopolists, and they're so concentrated that they can agree on how to spend that money that they can end up steering their own course. People look at that picture of the tech leaders with Donald Trump in 2016 at the top of Trump Tower on that table meeting with them, and they go like, how can Tim Cook and all these other self-described bastions of liberalism meet with Donald Trump? And that's a fair question, but a better one is, how is it that everyone who runs tech fits around a single table? That should be even more alarming.
And so when you talk about how the monopoly aspect is a big piece of why the status quo is as it is, let's talk through what it would look like if that weren't the case, because I could imagine that if instead of Facebook, Google, Amazon, pick the five and say instead there's 10 in each instead of each of the five, I could imagine, well, if everybody is more spread out rather than on one platform, it's harder to be as accurately predictive about how people are going to be behaving online because you've only got a fraction of the data rather than a huge portion of it. At the same time, there's the money argument, which is if you have 50 players instead of 5, no one of them is going to be so well funded that maybe they can. So how much of it is the financial piece? How much of it is the sort of network effect of everybody being on a few platforms?
Well, let's talk about network effects, because historically, network effects for tech were not as durable as they are in other areas, like, say, railroads, right? Network effects in railroads are super powerful because once you've got the rails, everyone's got to use them, and no one wants to build a second set of rails next to your rails. Right. But if you're, say, IBM, and you have this giant printer division called Lexmark, and you have the network effects of having this huge customer base, and you then decide to extract high rents for your toner, right? The carbon that you put into them, and you use a security chip to make sure no one puts their own carbon in it. Carbon is obviously a very abundant element. We're struggling to deal with an overabundance of carbon, not hard to get all the carbon you need. So along comes a little Taiwanese company called Static Controls, and they use the network effect like judo, because they say, hey, look, IBM has created this huge market of people who bought subsidized printers. We can sell them cheap toner. They clone IBM's chip, right? They make an interoperable chip. And now they own Lexmark. They bought Lexmark from IBM. Or if you're Apple and you're being outcompeted by Microsoft in the enterprise because Microsoft deliberately breaks compatibility between Microsoft Office for the Mac and Microsoft Office for Windows, you can just say, well, to heck with Microsoft, we're just going to reverse engineer how Microsoft Office works and release the iWork suite, Pages and Numbers and Keynote, so that Mac users can just interoperate with Windows users. So what I think is that when people have problems with the way that tech works, and those problems can be the result of tech trying to do something harmful to them, like manipulate them, or it can just be the result of tech not considering their uses, right? The technology that we've all encountered that assumes that you've always got a reliable internet connection has proved a lot less reliable than we hoped it would now that we're all stuck at home and sharing our internet with all of our neighbors all day long. You get to modify it. Or you get to find someone to modify it, or someone identifies you as a market and modifies that tech so that it suits your needs and not the needs of the shareholders of the people who made it in the first place. And that in that world, the equilibrium we get is companies competing to see how happy they can make you, not companies competing to see how tightly they can control your actions in the future so that you're stuck with them.
I want to continue down this path, but one sort of small tangential issue I'm curious to get your thoughts about is I was recently speaking to someone in the tech space who said, with a lot of you pick some niche area where there's like one big player. If you were to all of a sudden get 10 players in that same space, in all likelihood, they'd all be using Amazon Web Services. And so Jeff Bezos basically could still flip one switch and shut all 10 of them down. That's a very practical concern, but it's a real one, isn't it?
It certainly is. And that's why, traditional anti-monopoly remedies include something called structural separation, which was in the congressional report that was released this week as well. And structural separation starts with things like railroads being banned from owning coal companies or freight companies, where they own the people that they haul freight for, or they own businesses that compete with the people that they haul freight for. And you could imagine a structural separation regime for Amazon where they say you can be a platform or you can use the platform. But you can't compete with the users of the platform if you own the platform. That's like the casino boss coming down and gambling at the table opposite you. And the croupier knows that if the casino boss loses, the croupier loses their job too, right? We want a level playing field there. And I want to stress that there's like a little nuance here, because although I think the monopolies that tech has created are the same mediocre, sociopathic bullying tactics that we saw with coal and that we saw with electricity and that we see today with like beer and with logistics and so many other industries that have become super concentrated. Pro wrestling is down to one league, right? That there is one way in which tech is very different, and it is this compatibility idea. That making a pro wrestling league that can interact with other pro wrestling leagues seamlessly is hard. Making a version of Office for the Mac that can read and write Office for Windows turned out to be pretty straightforward. And the history of technology is filled with these companies that had dominance, like Amazon, and saw that dominance taken away from them because of interoperators, because of competitive compatibility, making new things that plug into old things, even though the people who made those old things don't want you to, and you're eating their lunch by doing so.
To pick one of the things you mentioned to dig into a little deeper, our data, the data about us, about our activities, and big tech having that data, using the data to market to us or through tracking pixels, allowing third parties to target us in very specific ways. There's a panoply of ideas about how and why this is bad. Can you focus in on, again, with your background in writing science fiction as well and having no shortage of connection to dystopian futures and near futures and so on, what are the real concerns there about big tech having our data? Which ones maybe are overblown in your mind?
So I want to dig into this, but it is like a technical and complicated issue. So I'm just going to give you like a top line here.
Yeah.
When we release data or when we harvest data and hold it and think about the risk of it being released non-consensually, like it leaking or being hacked from us or what have you, we try to anticipate the risks from that data being released. And when we give data to companies, we try to anticipate those risks. What could they do with X and Y and Z? X and Y and Z on their own aren't a big deal. So the NHS in the UK, where I used to live, did a controlled data release of prescribing data, longitudinal prescribing data, which is a super useful thing to have. So that, they gave each patient a random identifier, and then they said which doctor prescribed which meds to that person on what day at which hospital. And we could see through that data set, you could see, like, is there a risk if your doctor puts you on statins that you'll then have to go on tricyclic antidepressants or something, stuff like that is hard to see in individual cases or in studies, but the data might reveal. So that felt like a safe bet. If you asked me to review that data release, I would have said, I can't see any real risk in this release. But then a taxi company had a breach. And that taxi company was widely used by patients who went to hospitals for prescriptions. And so now you can see the person who went from David Pakman's house to this hospital to get these tricyclic antidepressants or hormones that are given to people who are undergoing gender transition or some other very sensitive prescribing data, that correlates exactly with David going back and forth to the hospital. So in order to understand the risks of a data harvesting, a data release, or giving your data to someone, you have to be able to anticipate all the other data that might be collected and released in the future. That's a very hard thing to be able to understand. And so the risk is effectively infinite, right? It is an unquantifiable risk that happens when we gather and create large data sets. And the lesson of history is that if you collect data, it will probably breach. And if you retain it long enough, it will absolutely breach. I mean, the thing I always tell firms when they ask me about this is if the NSA couldn't stop Snowden from leaking their documents,
right,
what makes you think that you're going to be able to stop someone from leaking your documents?
We will pause our conversation there with Cory Doctorow and go to a break on the podcast, radio, and television program, My Full Conversation with Cory. And it is fascinating so far. We'll be on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The number one funding source for the David Pakman Show has been and continues to be membership. And membership is not just a feel-good thing. You get access to the world-famous bonus show every single day just for members, as well as commercial-free audio and video feeds of the show day in and day out. You can sign up for membership very, very quickly at joinpakman.com. That's joinpakman.com. If the normal prices strike you as high, by all means, use the coupon code VOTESOON18, all one word, all lowercase. Become a member today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So in the last 24 to 48 hours, we were told that despite having coronavirus, Donald Trump plans to be at next week's debate with Joe Biden, which would be the second presidential debate scheduled for Thursday. Donald Trump, however, said this morning that he's bailing out on the second presidential debate with Joe Biden and will not participate after the Commission on Presidential Debates decided that because of health recommendations in light of Donald Trump being a coronavirus super spreader, those are my words, not the words of the Commission on Presidential Debates, they decided to move debate number 2 to a remote debate rather than do it in person. Frank Fahrenkopf, who's the head of the debate commission, told CNN they made this decision themselves. It wasn't a decision made with the presidential candidates, but they made it based on recommendations from the Cleveland Clinic, which advises the CPD on health-related issues in light of coronavirus. The statement put out by the CPD says that, quote, the second presidential debate will take the form of a town meeting in which the candidates would participate from separate remote locations. Well, Donald Trump does not like it. He was interviewed this morning by Fox Business host Maria Bartiromo. Trump says he's feeling great, and he will not do a debate via remote teleconference or video.
Thank you so much for being here. First question is, how are you feeling? How is the First Lady feeling this morning?
She's feeling good. I'm feeling good, really good. I think perfect. And we're ready to go. I'm ready to go, except the quarantine situation that you have for a little while after you get tested or whatever the procedure is. But I'm ready to do. I'm looking forward to doing the rallies. I heard that the commission a little while ago changed the debate style, and that's not acceptable to us. I beat him easily in the first debate, according to the polls that I've seen, but I beat him easily. I felt I beat him easily. I think he felt it too. He wouldn't answer any questions, and he had the protection of Chris Wallace all night long. I thought Chris Wallace was a disaster. But I beat him in the first debate. At the second debate, we have a never Trumper as a host, but that's okay because I beat him in the second debate also. And but I'm not going to do a virtual debate.
So Mr. President, you're not going to do it because the CPD, the Commission on Presidential Debates, announcing this morning that the second presidential debate will be virtual. Are you saying you're not going to participate?
No, I'm not going to waste my time on a virtual debate. That's not what debating's all about. You sit behind a computer and do a debate. It's ridiculous. And then they cut you off whenever they want.
Trump seemingly at the end there admitting what this is really about. They can cut you off whenever they want, which Donald Trump doesn't want because his strategy is to just keep talking. Most importantly, keep interrupting Joe Biden. Speculatively, the idea is that Trump believes, maybe accurately, that constantly interrupting Joe Biden will wreak havoc with Joe Biden struggling with a stutter his whole life, and that it is really, you're not arguing the issues when your idea is to just keep interrupting the other candidate. And now it starts to get wacky where Maria Bartiromo just can't control Trump. And we're going to look at this in the next segment, but listen to this.
I have a host who I always thought was a nice guy, but I see he's a never Trumper. Came out that he's a never Trumper. We do have some of them, Maria, believe it or not, because they don't like to win. But I'm not doing a virtual debate. They didn't even tell us about the debate, Maria.
When Fahrenkopf was asked about Trump not participating, he said that it's totally Trump's right. There is no law requiring a presidential candidate to debate. Frank Fahrenkopf said that in 1980, Jimmy Carter refused to participate in the first debate, later participated in the second debate. And the commission essentially saying it's up to the candidate to decide, do they want to debate or do they not want to debate? So as of right now, and forgive me if this has changed, it's possible the commission will change their plan. It's possible Trump will change his mind. Anything could happen. But as of right now, debate 2 scheduled to be remote. And Donald Trump will not participate in that second debate. And it's amazing how everything has come back. We talk about projection from the Trumpists and how all of these things they accuse others of are things they are doing themselves. For months now, Trump has been saying Biden will bail, Don Jr., others saying Biden's going to find a way out because Biden just can't do it. And it's actually Donald Trump who has been the first to say, I'm not going to participate in a debate. I don't really know how much it will hurt him. Listen, the other reality is the first debate really hurt Trump. Trump's polling fell off a cliff. The day after the first debate, we started to see a rapid ascent for Joe Biden and a rapid decline for Donald Trump. So it almost might be better for Trump not to debate from the standpoint of not doing even more damage by participating. It's certainly true that not given the chance to interrupt constantly, which maybe Trump wouldn't be given if indeed the debate was done in a remote format, it could be even worse for Donald Trump. So maybe he will end up participating. It's also conceivable that the CPD will come to some agreement. That there was an idea thrown around that they would move the debate outdoors and have sort of a big covered area where it's outdoors and socially distanced with plexiglass. I still think it's conceivable that in the next day or two, somebody proposes that and they say, given that we've been able to move the debate outdoors and account for this, that, and the other thing, that they'll do it in person again. It could happen. It might not. There might be no second debate. I don't know how it's all going to go. Does it turn into a Joe Biden town hall if Donald Trump simply doesn't participate, or do they cancel the event altogether? I don't know. But next, I want to look at some other clips from this interview that Trump did this morning. So let's now get into more of this bizarre interview that Donald Trump did with Fox Business host Maria Bartiromo this morning. The big news from this interview was that Donald Trump will not debate Joe Biden next week as of right now, because the Commission on Presidential Debates decided it would be a virtual debate. Trump doesn't want it. That was the sort of big headline. But as this interview went on, Donald Trump was making less and less sense, shouting things out that had nothing to do with what Maria Bartiromo was asking about, and once again raising the question about, is Trump manic because of his use of dexamethasone? Is Trump simply desperate because his polling has imploded? Does Trump think yelling about Hillary on Fox News will help his poll numbers? We don't know the answers to any of these questions, but I'm going to give you a small sampling of what went on here. But what is abundantly clear is this is not a well person. Here, Donald Trump claims that he recovered from coronavirus so quickly because he's a perfect physical specimen. And then they just start talking over each other, they being Donald Trump and the interviewer, Maria Bartiromo.
Tell me how you felt, what you went through. It's amazing to me that you're back in such strong form right now. How did that happen? You've been talking about Regeneron. Eli Lilly and Regeneron want FDA approval for emergency use at this point. Are they going to get it?
They're going to get it. Yeah, they're going to get it. I'm back because I'm a perfect physical specimen, and I'm extremely young. And so I'm lucky in that way. And you know, seriously,
what were your symptoms?
I don't have heart problems. I don't have diabetes. I don't have any of the problems that you read about. Perhaps a couple of pounds we could lose here and there, but, you know, there's a lot of people in that category. But no, I'm in good health, and I'm, you know, look, what happens is if you're anywhere around this thing, you can catch it.
And there's the big realization. Trump finally understands contagion. Isn't that amazing? If you're around it anywhere, if it's anywhere around you, you can catch it. It's like 7 or 8 months since this started. And Trump finally understands if someone with the virus is anywhere around you, you might catch the virus. An incredible learning experience for Trump, hasn't it been? Trump on the Joe Biden town hall, I guess, that Joe Biden did with Lester Holt a few days ago. Trump very angry about it, but it's not totally clear what he's talking about here.
NBC disaster where he went on the show with Lester Holt. It was meant for a child. It wasn't meant for a grown person. He gets up and he says, we're not fracking. We're not fracking. He was fracking for 6 months. He was fracking. He was raising his very thin hand, and he was fracking. And now all of a sudden he's not fracking. Well, tell the Pennsylvania people that you're going, it's ridiculous. He said he's not fracking.
Raising his very thin hand. It's not even possible to guess what this man is talking about here. Trump then accuses China of putting a curse on the United States. Take a listen to this.
It wasn't our workers' fault. It wasn't our airlines' fault that China did this terrible thing to us, and I will not be forgetting about that. China did this. This was all done by China. And we shouldn't be hurting our workers because China put the curse on, because this was a horrible scourge, a horrible thing that they did.
So the virus went from a biological agent released by a Chinese lab months ago. That was their idea months ago. Now it's simply a curse. So sort of going from a conspiracy to the occult. Trump then calls for Barack Obama and Joe Biden to be indicted for crimes, which of course he can never enumerate.
Unless Bill Barr indicts these people for crimes, the greatest political crime in the history of our country, then we're going to get little satisfaction unless I win, and we'll just have to go, because I won't forget it. But these people should be indicted. This was the greatest political crime in the history of our country, and that includes Obama, and it includes Biden. These are people that spied in my campaign, and we have everything. Now they say they have much more, okay? And I say, Bill?
Notice that Donald Trump still, after all these months of saying, biggest political crime in history, we caught them, we have all the evidence, Obama and Biden did it to me. Donald Trump still isn't able to tell us exactly what laws were broken, exactly what crimes Barack Obama and Joe Biden committed. But when you talk about my political enemies should be indicted, that's something we're used to hearing from other countries, but not so much from ours, except under Donald Trump. Then Trump bizarrely says he's killed terrorists who are bigger names than Osama bin Laden. It's all, what, celebrity fetishism with Trump? Take a listen to this.
We have the greatest troops in the world. I wiped out 100% of the ISIS caliphate. I killed Soleimani. I killed al-Baghdadi. Names that everybody, bigger names than Osama bin Laden. Al-Baghdadi founded ISIS.
Everything is hyperbole. Everything is superlative with this guy. Bigger names than Osama bin Laden. It's always been about, can I do more? Can I do it better? Can I do it bigger than Barack Obama? And then it really got wacky. Trump reacting to last night's vice presidential debate between between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris. And Trump says of Kamala, she is a communist. And then with no shred of sarcasm or joking at all, says that Joe Biden wouldn't make it 2 months as president. Seems like he's talking health-wise.
Industry here. What was your reaction to the debate? What wasn't said that you would have liked to come out? And where do you think the most striking moments were?
I thought that wasn't even a contest last night. She was terrible. She was, I don't think you could get worse, and totally unlikable. And she is. She's a communist. She's left of Bernie. She's rated left of Bernie by everybody. She's a communist. We're going to have a communist, and she's going to be, in my opinion, within a month. Look, I stood next to Joe, and I looked at Joe. Joe's not lasting 2 months as president. Okay, that's my opinion.
Joe Biden won't last 2 months, says Donald Trump, of course, without any evidence. And remember, Trump is the one that's sick right now, and that came up as well. On the issue of Trump having coronavirus, Trump says he hasn't been tested for coronavirus recently, but that he is essentially very clean, he says.
Out of the Senate hearing that he was supposed to do. Mr. President, I know you have to go. Just to recap, you're not going to do the next debate because it's virtual. You're feeling good. I know I want to make sure that the audience understands you're feeling good. Have you been tested recently? Can you tell us anything else about your condition?
I'll be tested very soon, but I'm essentially very clean. They say it's over a period of 6-7 days. And it was an amazing thing happened to me. I just went in and I didn't feel good. And that's okay. I expected at some point because I'm out there. I've got to be a leader. I can't, Winston Churchill didn't sit in his basement for 6 months. I got a lot of things doing.
I'm essentially very clean. Famous last words from Donald Trump. One really wild thing. As Maria Bartiromo tries to end the interview, this is wild. Trump yells out of nowhere, why hasn't Hillary Clinton been indicted? He just yells it out of nowhere.
Well, I'd like to come back to the White House soon to do another interview, Mr. President. I'd love to come back to the White House. I saw it up
Hillary
close
Clinton
and
being
personal.
Indicted for terminating 33,000 emails that she got from Congress. Congress made a request to see him. Everybody else I know gets indicted when they don't give that. They don't give. She destroyed 33,000 emails. Forget about the fact that they were classified. Let's go. Maybe Mike Pompeo finally finds them, okay?
The interview was over as far as Maria Bartiromo was concerned. Donald Trump interrupts and yells out, why hasn't Hillary Clinton been indicted yet? It's sort of a fitting conclusion to a completely absurd interview. And we are seeing a desperate Trump. Yes, the steroids may be affecting his behavior. Yes, he still doesn't sound good. He sounds hoarse, struggling to breathe. But there is desperation here because Donald Trump on some level must realize half his campaign team has coronavirus. He's down in the polls. He blew it in that first debate. He may now not even be participating in the second debate. He must feel like this is slipping through his fingers like sand. And he's desperate. And this is what we see when Donald Trump gets desperate. Let's go to your voicemails now. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's a really funny voicemail about a fly landing on Mike Pence's head during the debate. Take a look.
Bro, Pence is such garbage. A literal fly just landed on this guy's head. He is such trash that literally flies are landing on his head. What's the opposite of when Bernie gets a bird to land on his little podium? It's when a fly lands on Pence's trash ass head. Goodbye, Pence. Bye-bye.
Yeah, a lot of people reacting to the fly that took hold of Mike Pence's hair and seemed to get sort of caught up in his hair gel. I read a lot of interesting things about how I'm, as you know, I'm not religious, and I don't know if this is Old Testament or New Testament stuff or whatnot, but I guess a fly landing on your head is considered to be a very ominous sign, at least in some biblical teaching. And a bunch of people wrote to me about that. It doesn't resonate with me, but with Pence being such a religious guy, it is pretty damn funny. We've got a great bonus show for you today. We will update the Biden-Harris student debt plan. I think this is important and I want to go over it. We will also talk about 24 super habitable planets that have conditions that are better for human life than Earth. Better. And we will also talk about the LGBT takeover of the Proud Boys hashtag on the internet. It is absolutely hilarious. All of those stories and more on the bonus show. Get instant access by becoming a member at joinpakman.com. Thanks so much for watching today's episode. Just a reminder, today's program was made possible by Vincero Watches, the American watchmaker building super quality wristwatches, but making them affordable for everyday people. And they're giving you 15% off when you go to davidpakman.com/Vincero. Today's show also sponsored by Blinkist. Blinkist is the app that lets you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in 15 minutes. And you can try Blinkist for free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/DavidPakman. I've put that link down below underneath the video.